1. There was a general air of festivity and abandon. 2. The captain gave the order to abandon ship. 3. Don't abandon yourself to pleasures. 4. I was obliged to abandon that idea. 5. We had to abandon the car. 6. I threw you abandon me regardless. 7. How could she abandon her own child? 8. People often simply abandon their pets when they go abroad. 9. No need to abandon their own people more than tears desperate not born. 10. The pair have often been known to abandon their script and begin ad-libbing. 11. Each side declared that it would never abandon its principle. 12. Dreams don't abandon a painstaking pursuit of the people. As long as you never stop pursuing, you will bathe in the brilliance of the dream. 13. One should give up anger. One should abandon pride. One should overcome all fetters. All never befall him who clings not to mind and body and is passionless. 14. Time will abandon those funny oaths, until we also agree. 15. We decided to abandon the first draft of the report and start over. 16. After careful deliberation, it was agreed to abandon the project. 17. Rescuers were forced to abandon their search. 18. We danced with wild abandon. 19. Don't abandon yourself to despair. 20. Snow forced many drivers to abandon their vehicles. 21. People were shouting and cheering with abandon. 22. He gave the order to abandon ship. 23. He has spent money with gay abandon. 24. They drank and smoked with reckless abandon. 25. Good love makes you see the whole world from one person, while bad love makes you abandon the whole world for one person. 26. He went through with his plan although all his friends advised him to abandon it. 27. If you love a girl, it's better to fight for her happiness than to abandon her for the sake of her happiness. 28. When the mood is fallen, only thought is to abandon all. 29. Good love makes you see the whole world from one person, while bad love makes you abandon the whole world for one person. 30. I love you, the ends of the earth, to does not abandon. 31. We had no option but to abandon the meeting. 32. Sweden isn't likely ever to abandon its traditional neutrality. 33. The next best solution is to abandon the project altogether. 34. They shouted in gay abandon. 35. He signed checks with careless abandon. 36. We had to abandon our abortive attempts. 37. They had to abandon the match because of rain. 38. We had to abandon any further attempt at negotiation. 39. Abandon hope, all ye who enter here. 40. We will never abandon our principles. 41. We should not yet abandon this option for the disposal of highly radioactive waste. 42. She argued with such vehemence against the proposal that they decided to abandon it. 43. They had to abandon their attempt to climb the mountain. 44. We were sinking fast, and the captain gave the order to abandon ship. 45. Their decision to abandon the trip was made because of financial constraints. 46. He played with an abandon that was strangely absent from his performance last week. 47. He was at one with Wheatley on the need to abandon free trade. 48. The captain had to give the order to abandon ship. 49. Many want to abandon the multilateral trade talks in Geneva. 50. We had to abandon the car and walk the rest of the way. 51. Too many experts tell us that good mothers do not abandon their children to babysitters. 52. It did not persuade them to abandon the war, but it did force them to reappraise their strategy. 53. How could she abandon her father now, in his hour of need? 54. He dashed into the burning house with reckless abandon. 55. The British government may have to abandon its policy of non-intervention. 56. She rationalized her decision to abandon her baby by saying she could not afford to keep it. 57. They ran out of money and had to abandon the project. 58. They had to abandon their lands and property to the invading forces. 59. It was his instinct for self-preservation that led him to abandon his former friends and transfer his allegiance to the new rulers. 60. The government does not propose to abandon the project altogether. 61. They have to find the fathers who abandon their children and make them pay maintenance. 62. If disturbed, the bird may abandon the nest, leaving the chicks to die. 63. I remember one time we had to abandon our car in the snow. 64. The market might abandon the stock, and knock down its price. 65. The storm got worse and worse. Finally, I was obliged to abandon the car and continue on foot. 66. We were unable to get funding and therefore had to abandon the project. 67. They had perforce to abandon the attempt on the summit. 68. She lay sprawled across the sofa, in an attitude of complete abandon. 69. The president should abandon his hard line in the region. 70. Shop assistants abandon customers to pinch its cheek. 71. He called on them to abandon their armed struggle. 72. Rather than joyous abandon, I am full of thought. 73. We do not intend to abandon this policy. 74. Robed cultists danced with moderate abandon. 75. He was discouraged, ready to abandon ship. On Ray McGovern to abandon his protest. 76. We make ready to abandon ship. 77. Of course I don't want to abandon ship. 78. Hamilton spent the company's money with reckless abandon. 79. It's a nuisance having to abandon my belongings, though. 80. He was the first to realize that you can abandon divine creation of species without abandoning the argument from design. 81. There was increased pressure on North Korea to abandon nuclear arms development. 82. Charles realized that he must abandon the attempt to reassert the forest rights enjoyed by his medieval predecessors. 83. But politicians have borrowed decency from these words with such abandon, they are bankrupt. 84. No organization likes being told that it has got to hold back its expansion or abandon some pet project. 85. The Shadow Cabinet decided in April 1912 that it would abandon the referendum idea and return to the full tariff policy. 86. For things to reveal themselves to us, we need to be ready to abandon our views about them. Thich Nhat Hanh. 87. Gritting her teeth, she lowered her head and barged through them, swinging the cable cutters with wild abandon. 88. As news about the Archdiocesan report began to circulate, the pressure increased on Ray McGovern to abandon his protest. 89. And yet woman is coerced through submission to the symbolic order to abandon feminine desire and a peculiarly feminine relation to origins. 90. Ribble soon had to abandon the other two ships, the last reminders of a planned Huguenot empire. 91. After completing his apprenticeship he suffered a breakdown in health and was compelled to abandon his intended profession. 92. He made the hard decision to abandon the old world. 93. When you abandon making choices, you enter the vast world of excuses. Wayne Dyer. 94. The majority was still not ready to abandon the belief that humankind was intended to dominate the earth. 95. Knighton is reported to be ready to abandon his takeover bid. 96. To abandon hope should be a one-shot deal. A man should not have to do it twice. 97. Lesser butlers will abandon their professional being for the private one at the least provocation. 98. If we abandon international news coverage, no one is going to do it. 99. If you are enslaved by laziness, irresolution, wavering, negative behaviors and timidity, luck will abandon you. Dr. T. P. Chia. 100. But rising gas prices in the 1970s forced the corporation to abandon the project. 101. I don't understand why Andropoulos and the others didn't abandon ship earlier. 102. Nevertheless, The appearance of Forbes's paper led Darwin to abandon any idea of a separate publication on the topic. 103. God abandons only those who abandon themselves, and whoever has the courage to shut up his sorrow within his own heart is stronger to fight against it than he who complains. George Sand. 104. Education leaders do not want to abandon California's commitment to affordable college education. 105. Surely those were good questions which need answering, and to abandon the community interpretation deprives us of the only possible answer. 106. The crisis and the government's decision to abandon its currency controls hit the already fragile banking system hard. 107. Chilperic and Guntram united against him, but Sigebert forced Guntram to abandon the alliances on 2 occasions. 108. Owing to rough weather, the Coast Guard had been forced to abandon the search. 109. Democrats are discussing whether to abandon an effort to force a House vote on a resolution condemning the actions of Rep. 110. I wanted to be accurate about it, and in order to be accurate, you have to abandon all restrictions. 111. Does it simply abandon services delivered by bureaucrats and professionals? 112. Both sides fought with abandon, crimson waters swirling round their knees. 113. I don't feel I can abandon Krieger after having worked with here all this time. 114. He rattled off the list of headline-worthy cases he was being forced to abandon. 115. However, stricter voting procedures had forced the Democrats to abandon their traditional corruptions. 116. What Lenin did not abandon in return was his fundamental antipathy to capitalism. 117. Those who saw her and Minton jiving together never forgot the coordinated abandon with which they cleared the dance floor. 118. I had 2 punctures and was forced to abandon the Nissan. 119. First of all, it implies an apprenticeship period in which the craftsman learns control so that he can later abandon it. 120. But the difference really shows in the deliberate attempt to abandon traditional forms of school discipline. 121. Paul Reitman was not yet ready to abandon the ship. 122. The thought of presenting her naked behind to him so crudely filled her with a wild abandon. 123. The volcano eruption forced the U.S. to abandon Clark Air Force Base. 124. Synod members were under pressure to crack down on gay clergy, who were portrayed as leading lives of wild abandon. 125. The driving rain saw streams turned into muddy torrents, blocking roads and forcing some motorists to abandon their cars. 126. Bright 16-year-olds abandon all but 2 or 3 academic subjects, thus ensuring that scientists remain unread and art students maths blind. 127. Alexandro stared at Valence, and it was as if their minds conjoined for an instant. Valence would never abandon Alexandro. 128. They fired away with wild abandon, but luckily with little accuracy, and he was able to extricate himself. 129. Ferris took the decision to abandon the aircraft, which crashed at 12:05 at Oxborough, Norfolk. 130. My consolation is in your ecstasy when you abandon hope, and there's nothing to be done. 131. They enrolled here expecting much and are reluctant to abandon ship, though I have argued with them. 132. Half an hour went by, and then we gave up, reluctantly deciding to abandon the car. 133. By most people's standards, Marilyn Monroe was fairly uninhibited, bathing infrequently, and belching and farting with carefree abandon. 134. Of course, retreating from the trials of the 20th century existence does not mean one wants to abandon its many creature comforts. 135. Loretta decided she would have to abandon her attempt to see Veronica for the rest of the day. 136. Catholic civil servants usually had to abandon any practical political project if they wished to proceed through the ranks. 137. Yet far from leading him to abandon or modify his policies, opposition incited him to more drastic methods. 138. They shoot and blow each other up with reckless abandon. 139. He scratches and gouges with abandon in the fluent paint. 140. Many aging enthusiasts began to abandon sports cars for sport utilities. 141. Despite their arguments, I still saw no reason to abandon my agnosticism. 142. Campaigners now hope parish councillors will abandon their scheme for 30 new lights and accept alternative proposals instead. 143. And it would largely abandon the principle of progressivity, under which the wealthy pay higher rates than the middle class. 143. SentenceDict.com is an online sentence dictionary, on which you can find excellent sentences for a large number of words. 144. Retreating troops were told to abandon their weapons and run as fast as they could towards the beach. 145. His response is to abandon the troubled human mind, and delve into the animal world instead. 146. The second-level decision required is whether or not to authorize further research or to abandon the project at decision node 2B. 147. Then all the bells joined in with wild abandon, ringing joyfully and merrily, welcoming in the new year. 148. It gained and lost with abandon, crushing the Harrisons with embarrassment. 149. But when a 4-day strike at the unit threatened to stall vehicle production, Chrysler agreed to abandon those efforts. 150. Some sectors, moreover, lagged behind completely by force of circumstances or on account of reluctance to abandon traditional ways. 151. Over the months the women have got to know each other, to laugh with abandon, and to touch. 152. The crew now wanted to abandon ship, and a few minutes later red flares were seen dead ahead. 153. But if the general were the unclear, we could with reason abandon all science and inquiry. 154. Termination would leave the government with no option but to invite bids for a new concession, or abandon the project. 155. What would it feel like to abandon herself to his touch? 156. We have often been tempted to abandon this task. Then another battered woman would come into our lived. 157. Republicans, meanwhile, are mulling whether to abandon the notion of filing ethics charges against Rep. 158. We should not abandon the search for a better way of determining pay for all health service staff. 159. Only once did I abandon an effort to sample a specific black smoker because I could not safely get into position. 160. Why don't we abandon the original plan and go straight to Debenham and Freebody, as we're so close? 161. Much of the renovation work was already done before a previous developer had to abandon the project. 162. As a raconteur and conversationalist, scattering indiscretions and gossip with gay abandon, he was the acme of unconventionality. 163. It is not clear, he said, whether the review will formally abandon the policy or simply ignore it. 164. Toronto bruisers Ty Domi and Shane Corson finished checks with abandon. 165. With reckless abandon, she pressured herself to him, striving to mold herself to his tough maleness. 166. He says they should not be forced to abandon their education. 167. I shall not abandon the effort to persuade you otherwise. 168. In contrast, the tubes of a tubeworm are fixed and the worms never abandon their tubes. 169. I abandon myself to you. I even want you to abuse and degrade me. 170. Now, with reckless abandon, it promises to meddle with local government structure. 171. When we were alone together, we were rather shy with each other, tacitly agreeing to abandon the stand-up routine. 172. To break totally new ground is to abandon the conventional rules. 173. Frostbite forced them to abandon the expedition, In 1988 and 1989 they were defeated by freak weather conditions. 174. Here we debated whether to abandon our planned route and continue along the coastline. 175. Perhaps, he thought with sudden abandon, he should give Edith Mallory a ring this very moment and express his thanks. 176. Don't be sad, don't low-spirited, even the whole world all abandon you. Still have us at least, the house of your sweet in the state, run piggery. 177. The girls jumped up and down and waved their arms with abandon. 178. The present is a moment in time when we decide to lower our expectations of the future or to abandon some of the dear traditions from the past to be able to go through the narrow gate of here and now. 179. In a word, the matter appears simple and natural as soon as we abandon the extraordinary conception of the endogamous Roman gens and regard it, with Morgan, as originally exogamous. 180. In Abandon an Illusion, Hind, if cannot, dedicated and consistent, very will easy by be involved in wrong vortical in. 181. Last year, it made a wager on the Kuwaiti dinar, which became the first currency in the region to abandon a strict peg to the dollar. 182. This conditional active interest in the outcome is, the children learned how to abandon their own true feelings and aspirations, but the parents accept that part of self-praise. 183. Control, emotional, language and behavior. Think. Life, death and eternity. Abandon. Evil, ignorance and betrayal. Train. A rational and humble and curiousness. 184. In modal dialogues, the cancel button means, abandon my input and close the dialogue. 185. Having shown himself ready to abandon those favorite notions of Frenchmen and Italians, it is a pity he should obstinately retain certain worn-out phrases about the Germans. 186. Working hard makes you feel better about yourself and, after a prolonged period of hard slog, you feel sufficiently virtuous to enjoy a bout of self-indulgence with the gayest abandon. 187. To my way of thinking, it is the lifeline of religion to abandon the doxy and credo, and to have dialogue filled with self-discipline and reason. 188. At the party, people sang and danced with abandon, totally forgetting the troubles in their lives. 189. A word ever circulated between male philtrum very long. If date before 3 times to did not get decided word, so abandon stoutly. 190. When you have an opportunity to make a difference, do so generously and with abandon. 191. Built in the 1870s in rural Nevada, USA to process local wood into charcoal, The kilns were soon abandoned due to a town fire and flooding, but remain in good condition even today. 192. They hope their words and deeds can cause the attention of other, peacockish, egocentric, ego-abandon, often react to trifling bagatelle mood too intense, sometimes for no reason gets angry. 193. Sometimes it's really necessary for us to give up something, and learn to denial ourselves, then abandon things of life and mind resolvedly. 194. Meanwhile, they differ a lot in the means they negate subjectivity and abandon pre-existent rules and in the way they oppose reason and logic. 195. Over time, we think that consumers will adopt the mobile phone to be the payment method of choice, Schultz said, though she added that people won't completely abandon plastic credit cards. 196. After a heated argument, the Marquise and her daughter abandon the castle, leaving her husband's guard with a pleasant memory. 197. Moving onto land may have been a survival strategy resulting from the need to abandon one shrinking body of water for another. 198. The former tennis star Martina Navratilova has been forced to abandon attempts to climb Africa's highest mountain after suffering from altitude sickness. 199. They were so excited that they jumped and shouted with abandon. 200. Zhou Yilin is very bold to abandon restraint, face to the most primitive and true instinct of human, and the desire, expansion, putridity and pretense that growing from instinct. 201. The nuclear test on May 25 followed a series of confrontational actions taken by the North, largely reversing every step it had taken to abandon its nuclear program in recent years. 202. All crew members assembled on boat deck and exercised abandoned ship drill. 203. Along with Saif al-Islam, he persuaded Gaddafi to abandon his pursuit of weapons of mass destruction, and opted to share intelligence information with the U.S. on al-Qaeda operatives in Libya. 204. But when the real trial comes, they abandon us just as a hired hand leaves the sheep when the wolf appears. 205. There must be something I have to abandon after the leaves fall. Is that diary written at my 16, or those beautiful lily-like secrets which all my life I have been keeping? 206. However, I think that one must abandon oneself to new experiences when overseas without treating one's training with abandon. 207. The agency wants to force Boeing to abandon its South Carolina facility and locate it in Washington, an act that appears unprecedented in the NLRB's history. 208. Their tragedies are due to their unpracticalness, overestimation of their own power and their inability to abandon conventions completely.